Welcome, everybody. My name is Corky. I'm with Yolo Basin Foundation, and we're back. We've had kind of a little hiatus from our Flyway night, so I'm excited to have the program back tonight, and I'm really excited about this evening's program. So I'm going to share up my screen here and let you know what we're doing. So Flyway Nights is our speaker series that we do about 6 months out of the year. And tonight's program is on beavers. Beavers, I think Yola Bypass Wildlife Area has a little bit of a love-hate relationship with these little guys, but I'm pretty excited about it. So I was very excited when the Beaver Restoration Program said yes, that they would come and share with us tonight. And just to note, next month we are going to have Max Stevenson with the Pewter Creek. He is the Pewter Creek stream keeper, and he's going to be talking about salmon in particular, salmon in the bypass and kind of how things are going with that. Also want to make a little bit of a plug for California Duck Days. I know it feels like it's a long way away, but April will come soon. We are having a time change. We're going to go 9 to 3 instead of 9 to 4 this year and see how that goes. And also we are in process of recruiting volunteers. So if that's something that is of interest to you, we have our little QR code here. You can also, of course, go to the website. And if you connect with our volunteer coordinator before March 1st, you also get to choose your design. There's going to be 3 different choices of designs for the t-shirts this year. And if you want to get to choose your own, we're hoping you're going to sign up to be a volunteer early. All right, I'm going to bring my screen back down and I'm going to pop this on over to our partners at the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and headed by Molly Alves.
We're
And
so close.
so close. I had it earlier. And I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself, your team, and we'll get started. So thanks for joining us tonight.
Yes, thank you, Corky, for having us, and thanks to everyone in attendance for spending some time to learn about the Beaver Restoration Program here in California. My name's Molly Alves. I'm the Beaver Restoration Program Supervisor, and fortunately for you all, you don't have to just listen to me talk for an hour. I actually have all of my staff here with me tonight who are going to help me out, telling you about the different ways that they are contributing their expertise to the program. So I'm going to give them an opportunity when it's their time to share their pieces with you to introduce themselves. And so we will get started. If my slides will work. There we go. Just want to start with a quick little bit of housekeeping. So we're going to do this a little bit differently than maybe you guys typically are used to for those who are returning to this speaker series. I'm just going to start off with a little introduction to our program and then kick it over to my staff. And at the end of each of their sessions, we're going to open it up for 1 or 2 questions, just because they're talking about very different aspects of the program, and it'd be great to keep some of the questions specific to the content of each of those sessions. But if your question does not get answered between sessions, there will be plenty of time at the end to answer the rest of the questions. So with that, for those of you who are completely unfamiliar with our program, the Beaver Restoration Program was initiated in 2022 by an act of the state budget, and it was initiated in the efforts to work with tribes and NGOs, private landowners, and others within the state to increase coexistence with beavers and look at areas where we could restore habitat using beaver-assisted or nature-based solutions like beaver translocation to combat some of our state's climate issues. In 2024, just 2 years later, this program was codified, so it is now permanent within the state law, which is very exciting. We move fast. And so, just to give you kind of an overview of our program, our mission here is to gather a comprehensive understanding of where, when, and how beavers can be utilized or partnered with to restore ecosystem processes and habitats in California. We want to be able to communicate those findings in clear and meaningful ways, and with that knowledge, use beavers as a nature-based solution to restore and conserve habitats and watersheds for the species that are underneath CDFW's purview. And so why does California all of a sudden, if you will, give a damn about beavers? Well, I'm sure we've all heard the term ecosystem engineers. Beavers build dams, and the reason that they do this is to create what we call aquatic escape cover. On land, beavers, we like to refer to them as kind of furry chicken nuggets. A lot of things like to eat them, and they're very clumsy on land, but in water, they are very agile and fast, and so they create these dams to pool water where they can escape from predation. In doing so, they create these wetland habitats that support a multitude of other species in the state. They contribute large woody debris to our waterways, and that creates really amazing salmon spawning and rearing habitat. They excavate canals, and that's in an effort to access food resources, but in doing so, they reconnect floodplains. And they also restore riparian vegetation as well. And so this damming activity really helps to increase ecosystem resilience to a lot of the climate change issues that we're experiencing here in California. These wetland complexes, when widespread on the landscape, can create fire breaks. They recharge groundwater and increase our summer base flows. And they can also sequester carbon and other pollutants in our waterways. The dams also decrease downstream sediment transport and deposition, which can be harmful to salmon. And they can decrease channel incision as well. And all of this creates and restores some really critical habitat for both wetland and riparian obligate species, including some of our threatened and endangered species here in the state. And so when the program was established, we were given 4 funding directives. Those directives are 1, to promote human beaver coexistence strategies, which Lee will be telling you about shortly. We are tasked with developing a beaver management and restoration plan, which I will tell you a little bit about later. Conduct beaver translocations specifically for restoration purposes, and to do what we're doing right now. Conduct outreach and education to stakeholders and the public. And to give you an example of some of the work that we've done on outreach and education, this past year, we created a Beaver Blitz for California Biodiversity Day. If you're familiar with BioBlitzes, it's exactly like that, but specifically for beavers. And what we did was we educated folks on how to identify beavers and their sign, and encouraged them to go out in areas of the state where we have little information on whether or not beavers exist. And all of those contributions help build out our beaver distribution map, which is available on our website. And that data really helps us determine where are the most important places to put beavers where they're historically native but currently absent. And so with that, I am going to kick it over to Lee, and I will let him introduce himself to you.
Thank you, Molly. Let me know if you can hear me. My name is Lee Margadant. I'm an environmental scientist, coexistence coordinator with the Beaver Restoration Program. And I'm here to discuss beaver conflict and coexistence. So we go to the next slide. All right. So despite all the wonderful environmental benefits that Molly mentioned earlier, beaver engineering activities in a human populated area inevitably leads to conflict. That's especially true of some of the state wildlife areas, including Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area. Yolo is a historic 80,000 acre wetland in the Central Valley, and they manage waters manually there to replicate the seasonally changing flows of the historic Central Valley. They do this management on behalf of waterbirds, shorebirds, and other wildlife species who historically relied on that for centuries. However, they also manage this water for agricultural and recreation use on the property. So it's a mixed use operation. It also lies in historic beaver native range, and there's still a significantly large population of beavers at the site. And the beavers do not like these fluctuating water depths at Yolo, so they do everything in their power to plug those up. This creates a tremendous maintenance effort for the state land staff at Yolo. Beavers fell trees over roads, they burrow into banks, levees, and under roadways, and they are constantly plugging up the water control structures. Thank you. These conflicts extend to any human-dominated landscape. If you think of all the water control structures in our world, the culverts, bridges, weirs, beavers would love to plug those up for us. You think about all the decorative trees we plant, the agricultural crops that we maintain that the beavers would really like to eat. In essence, beavers really are humanity's perfect foil. Beavers do all this, as Molly mentioned, due to their basic biology. Beavers fell tree for food and to secure shelter in forms of lodges, dams, but this can create hazards to infrastructure from dropping trees on roads and buildings. The flooding the dams create result in deep pools which act as refuge from predation, but this also can flood out roadways and inundate undesirable areas. The burrowing can provide den sites for a beaver and allow them access to the landscape through canals, but this can also undermine our roadways and levees. So you can see all of this leads to a lot of human health and safety concerns. So when the landowners experiencing these beaver conflicts, they should go online to the CDFW Wildlife Incident Reporting System, which we refer to as the WIR. From there, those incidents are investigated by CDFW's Human Wildlife Conflicts branch, and they aid in finding a resolution for that issue. Next slide. Now, previously, there's only a few ways to deal with beaver issues, and one of those was issuing depredation permits for lethal removal. Fish and Game Code states that our department shall issue permits to landowners who are experiencing conflict with wildlife. However, in 2023, when our program was initiated, there was a change in how the state dealt with beavers. This change was designed to offer a more considered issuance of those depredation permits and to resolve beaver conflicts non-lethally whenever possible. However, those depredation permits are still available to the public, but going forward, we're going to verify that beaver damage is actually occurring on the site. That's what they're seeing. We also want to assess the benefits and impacts to the co-occurring listed species at that specific site. We want to identify and recommend feasible non-lethal deterrents that are applicable to that site, and we want to ensure some level of compliance. Now, it's completely voluntary for a landowner to partake in these non-lethal deterrents. We could issue them their depredation permit along with a recommendation for a non-lethal deterrent. And should they choose not to go through with the non-lethal deterrent and then come back to us the following year requesting another depredation permit, they might not receive their permit unless they do engage in some form of coexistence. Next slide. However, the good news is that most human beaver conflicts can be addressed with non-lethal deterrence. Let me catch up to my slide here. So this is good news because it enables beavers to continue occupying the site while maintaining the human values and infrastructure there. This allows those ecosystem benefits to persist on the landscape, and we're not just removing those. What you see here is a diagram with all of the beaver complaints we received in the WIR across the top axis. And on the left side of that axis, these are all the non-lethal deterrents that are applicable to solving those issues. Now, this diagram is going to be part of a forthcoming coexistence toolkit. It's basically going to help any landowner who's having a specific issue find the specific device that'll help alleviate those problems. Yeah, I wasn't going to touch on all these devices tonight. I'm just going to kind of briefly, broadly talk about how these things function. Of course, the main complaints we receive in the weir are around flooding, tree damage, and burrowing. The devices we recommend operate really by two strategies: exclusion or deception. With an exclusion device, you're basically creating a physical barrier that prevents the beaver from getting to that tree or to that water control structure and damming it up. With a deception device, you're tricking the beaver. So, despite all its engineering efforts, it can't block the flow at the site. This is usually achieved through a long pipe run across the bottom of a pond through a dam or a water control structure. The end of that pipe's inlet is further upstream, and it's protected. And the beaver either can't find that inlet to block it up, or they're unaware of this, and this creates a continuous leak that the beavers can't stop. So you have the continued flow at the site, it prevents flooding, and you also have a persisting active beaver dam on site. Now, all of these devices are extremely adaptable to the different waterways we come across in California, and they extremely long-term efficacy compared to lethal removal. So some of these devices are as simple as you see here in the lower right picture. That's just simple tree fencing wrapped around a tree to protect it from beavers chewing on it. The picture right above that shows a double inlet fence and pipe system attached to a exclusion fence running under a highway culvert. So some of the devices we use, they utilize both of those strategies I was talking about, but all of them, if you maintain them properly, can last up to 10 years and keep beavers on site and without creating an issue. I mentioned that we were working on a CDFW coexistence toolkit. Now, we've been working on this for a long time, but we're basically just going to provide build sheets to landowners who are experiencing these issues, and it's going to use that, and it's going to recommend those deterrents based on the conflict categories from that previous slide we looked at. So a landowner can find their issue and then link it to their proper device. But these build sheets are going to have complete supply lists, all the equipment you're going to need. It's going to give you an average cost and detailed building instructions. And we hope to have that come online maybe this year. Next slide. So our program's role in the beaver conflict management space is to provide coordination between CDFW's human-wildlife conflict and certified conflict responders. So if we receive a beaver conflict in the weir system, we want that landowner to be provided with an accurate, non-lethal recommendation for their site, usually coming out of our coexistence toolkit. We want to also link them to a responder who can actually get this thing on the ground. And we also want to point them to some funding resources. However, the nexus, that change in policy I mentioned before, also provides us with the nexus for our translocation projects. So on sites where we verify that there's beaver damage and there's no viable coexistence measures, we can use some of these specific weir cases to serve as source populations for our translocation projects. However, this isn't really a readily available conflict management tool. There are far too many beaver conflicts in the state for us to reasonably relocate them all. So this is just a small couple of cases we can do this for in a year. So in CDFW, there's going to be three outcomes for a beaver depredation incident. Either implement that non-lethal deterrent, a depredation permit's issued, or our program translocates that beaver family. So to be eligible for a translocation trapping, a landowner experiencing depredation has to submit their instance in that weir system. And when we have an approved translocation project, our staff reviews that depredation incidence on the weir, and we select the source seed beavers that are most appropriate for what we're looking for. If you can see this figure here, this shows all of the source populations we've trapped during the duration of our program so far. You can see we've selected 4 private lands that had active weir incidents in the program, or in the weir, and then we had 5 trapping events at wildlife areas that had long-term issues. And You can see that at Yolo, they have long-term issues, and they also had an active weir case in some of the rice operations at the time we trapped there last summer. I did just want to point out again that translocation is not a long-term solution for beaver conflict. When you remove a beaver from a wetland, it remains good beaver habitat. So they're likely just going to be reoccupied by another beaver. And like I mentioned, there's just far too many beavers for us to reasonably relocate them all. So first and foremost, we should always be thinking of coexistence first. Next slide. Finally, one of the biggest hurdles facing getting these devices on the ground is financial assistance. And there's a couple federal programs out there that are available who can help with that. The Partners for Fish and Wildlife program in U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the EQIP program, or Environmental Quality Incentive Program at NRCS. Both of these programs are excellent for people who want to restore or enhance lands for wildlife. And our CDFW actually granted $2 million for non-lethal beaver conflict management specifically, and that gave birth to the California Beaver Coexistence Training and Support Program. That provides technical and financial assistance to landowners, as well as training for professionals to install these devices. And now we have the California Beaver Help Desk, an online portal that just started last year. That's going to link landowners directly with people who can professionals who can install these devices for them. So there'll be links to all this on our website. So if you're interested, please go check that out. All right, and now we're going to take a little break for some questions if anyone has any burning questions right now.
Thank you, Lee. I haven't seen any come into the chat yet. So just a reminder, if you do have questions for our presenters, go ahead and drop them in the chat. Oh, we do have one here. Shoot. I got too many windows open at the same time. What does WIR stand for again?
Yeah, that's that's the Wildlife Incident Reporting System. So that's the online database that links us all to these incidents. We commonly call it the WIR. So.
Where were the source beavers taken from in Rockland?
I don't know if I can release that. Molly, what do you think about that?
Yeah, we are working with the city of Rockland to address numerous long-term issues. They have repeatedly submitted WIR incidents year after year, and we have internally decided with our conflict responders, they had a couple years of denied permits. And so we went in and assessed a variety of different long-term issues, recommended coexistence devices in a large portion of those issues that we saw. However, there was one or two issues, if I remember correctly, where beavers were compromising roadbed structures. So in cases where burrowing is collapsing either banks or roadways, those are issues that cannot be easily resolved with coexistence techniques. And so we decided to assist them by removing those beavers in those specific cases.
A couple more here, and then we'll continue on with our presentation. Do you have enough staff to support all the help needed for the beaver problems reported?
You want me to take that, Lee?
Sure.
Here, let me see. I have too many windows open. I can get my video back up. Here we go. Maybe. There I am. Hi, everyone. The answer is always going to be no. However, we work very, very closely with all of our regional offices. So we're a statewide program based in our headquarters. We personally do not deal, sorry, I have a dog. We do not personally deal with these conflict issues unless in coordination with our regional conflict responders. And so it's our conflict responders that actually field the beaver conflict reports. And then in cases like the ones I mentioned in Rockland, where coexistence just isn't feasible to resolve issues where flooding is really an imminent issue for access to roadways or human health and safety, that's when we get involved in beaver conflict.
Great.
So short answer, we personally do not, but we have many staff throughout the state that we're working with who have the capacity to address these issues.
Are there estimates of the present beaver population in California and estimates of the beaver population in the California area pre-European contact?
Yeah, no. No is the short answer. That is something that everyone in North America is trying to figure out. It's something that we are trying to slowly piece together through these Weir incident submissions by trying to get an idea of where the most beaver conflict is occurring. We're also using sources like iNaturalist and iBeaver and other direct submissions to our program to map beaver distribution. We're just starting to get an idea, really with the inception of this program, of the current distribution of beavers in the state. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in one of our next sessions.
So let's do one last question and then we'll move on to Kyle or Tanner. I'm not sure who's next. What does the Beaver Institute do? Is it a private enterprise?
The Beaver Institute is a nonprofit, and they started with Mike Callahan, who is based in Massachusetts, and he developed the Beaver Corps program, which is really the program that you go to in the United States to get trained in the implementation of coexistence. And so they contributed heavily. They actually came out and assisted us and the Occidental Arts and Ecology Center in training the practitioners who went through the program this past summer. And so, yeah, they're kind of a clearinghouse for beaver support, and they focus a lot on coexistence, but they also are the hosts of our biannual National Beaver Conference.
Super. All right. We'll hold the questions at that point and see what's next.
All right. Thank you so much, Lee. We will see more of him later. And now I'm going to kick it over to Tanner.
Can you hear me? Hear me well?
We can.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Tanner Harris. I'm an environmental scientist for the Beaver Restoration Program. I handle a lot of the mapping and fisheries projects that we require. And tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about our process for carrying out translocations from capture to captive holding, prioritizing projects and selecting projects, and then translocating beavers. So as Lee mentioned previously, one of the first steps that we have to go through is identifying a source population of beavers. Generally, we are taking advantage of beavers that are already in a conflict scenario and trying to avoid lethal depredation for those animals. Before we start trapping, we have to develop a capture and translocation plan, which has to be approved both at headquarters where our staff works and by the higher ups in the regions, because we're a statewide program that works out of Sacramento. We're always working in CDFW's regions, and we like to make sure we're on the same page with our regional staff. Once the plans are developed and approved, we can begin trapping. While we trap, we're holding beavers in captive holding facilities where their health is screened, and we can work them up for translocation. The next step in our process is beaver capture, so trapping. Once we've pinpointed a source population for beavers, we can start our pre-trapping process. This includes Pre-trapping site evaluations, where we assess a property for beaver sign and deploy game cameras, which help us determine our capture objectives, namely how many beavers are on our property and how do we go about catching those beavers. We use cage traps, which you can see in the top photo, and suitcase style traps, which you can see in the bottom photo. And we set those traps in areas of predictable activity, like beaver runways or slides, dams, and lodges. And this year, we're testing out a new cage style trap that's designed to help us trap beaver dams more effectively. So hopefully that works out well for us. We use game cameras and sign surveys, and we monitor the beaver activity at our sites to verify the completion of the trapping effort, meaning we've caught all of the beavers that we were looking to catch at a trap site. Next, the trap beavers that we catch have to be held temporarily in captivity. This ensures that all the beavers we catch can be translocated together as a unit. It also ensures that we can eliminate any pathogens or aquatic invasive species that the beavers we trap may be carrying, so we don't spread those bugs to the release sites. We currently have one holding facility for beavers at the CDFW Region 2 office in Rancho Cordova, and we have a second facility at the Salt Slough Check Station near Los Banos Wildlife Area. We were fortunate enough last year to completely renovate our holding facility at the Rancho Cordova office. It's made it much more suitable for housing semi-aquatic rodents. And while we're operating out of that Rancho Cordova office, we actually use Yolo Wildlife Area to secure forage for our beavers, usually willow branches and cattails. So we hold our trapped beavers for a minimum of 3 to 5 days and no longer than 2 weeks. And that time period allows us to treat the beavers with ivermectin to eliminate any internal parasites that they may have. We also try to keep them in clean water the entire time they're with us so that we can eliminate external bugs that they might be carrying around. And it's a challenge to keep nice clean water for so many beavers all the time. So we test the water for fecal coliforms, which informs us that we need to change the water. We're also looking into filtration systems and climate control systems that we can use at our facilities. And I think that will be a good step for making sure that the beavers in our care are as comfortable as possible. So every beaver that we trap comes to our facility and undergoes a similar intake process. All of the beavers are sexed by an evaluation of the color, the smell, and the texture of their anal gland secretions. We also can sex them by palpating for a baculum or a penis bone. We next weigh the animals and assess their body condition so we can classify their age as either a kit, a subadult, or an adult. And to keep the animals restrained while we're doing this workup, we hold them in what we call a beaver bag, which is kind of like a cake decorator's piping bag, where the head of the animal goes in the thin end, and we get access to everything we need on the back end. I should also mention that on intake, all of our animals are tagged in the ears using uniquely colored Flyway tags. They're kind of like the tags you would see on clothing at a department store. And that allows us to identify our animals both in captivity and in the field when we catch them on camera. We also outfit each of our animals with a pit tag, which is the same thing a vet might implant your dog with so that he can be returned to you if he runs away. So that's our intake process. And the larger animals that we collect have larger tails, which makes it possible for us to outfit them with a tail-mounted transmitter, either GPS or a VHF tag. In order to tag them in the tail, they need to be chemically immobilized or sedated so we can avoid any undue stress on the animal. But while they're sedated, we can take advantage of that opportunity to collect samples for disease, parasite, and genetics testing. We normally collect tissue samples, we collect nasal swabs, as well as blood and fecal samples. Now we have our beavers. They're in captivity. They've been worked up. They're ready to translocate. Where do we put them? In 2023 and 2024, we initiated our pilot projects with the Maidu Summit Consortium in Plumas County, as well as the Tule River Reservation and the Tule River Tribe in Tulare County. In 2025, we initiated 3 new projects that took place on private, municipal, and federal lands. And we currently have banked 22 applications for future projects that could take place on tribal, federal, or state property. But where are we allowed to move those animals? CDFW translocation policy constrains the translocation of a species to that species' native range, meaning that any beavers our program plans to translocate must be moved to watersheds that beavers inhabited prior to the European fur trade in the 18th and 19th centuries. And that fur trade is very important because it all but extirpated beavers from much of the United States. So we don't have a good idea of where beavers were at that point. So our program is tasked with determining a new formal native range. There is a previously recognized native range that our department put forth, but it seems that it was put forth rather speculatively and did not include many watersheds that beaver likely inhabited in California. It did not include much of the California coast. It didn't include portions of Southern California that are accessible to beavers, and it excluded all high elevation California watersheds. So the new determination that our program is going to make will be sure to take into account historical context, a modern understanding of beaver ecology and biology, as well as traditional tribal knowledge. We know where we can put beavers in a general sense now, so it's time for us to specifically hone in on what projects we would like to take on. In February of 2024, our program made public a project proposal form that allows the public to submit to us potential projects. We receive those submissions and we review them using our project prioritization model, which I will cover a little bit in the next slides. Once we prioritize our submissions, our staff will then go out in the field and conduct a suitability assessment. During those assessments, our staff are reviewing sites for adequate forage, for adequate escape cover in the form of deep water and dense brush. We look out for the density of woody building materials. We look at how suitable the geomorphic characteristics of a site are for the establishment of beaver dams, and we assess for the risk of conflict with adjacent landowners or for infrastructure on the property, the culverts and the roads and the trees that Lee talked about at the beginning of our presentation. So we assess a property, and if we feel that improvements are needed to make it suitable for beaver translocation, we will suggest those improvements, and we'll revisit and reassess the site once those improvements are implemented. And if a site simply does not qualify for beaver translocation, it will be removed from the candidate pool and be replaced by another project. If we decide that a project is approved and it's ready to go, then the next step is to translocate the beavers. I just wanted to touch quickly on the project prioritization model that we use. This is a model that identifies watershed with the highest ecological benefit potential from beaver translocation. It's important to note that the model doesn't predict ideal beaver habitat. It only shows us which watersheds have the most to gain from the ecological benefits that beavers provide. And it does that by incorporating key climate change variables associated with beaver engineering, as well as the distribution of sensitive species that are associated with beavers. Think you are threatened and endangered species. It includes regional biodiversity indices, as well as wildfire severity and probability data, and habitats that are significant to anadromous salmonids. And we can take any of these model inputs and adjust the weighting to suit unique project objectives, which we'll talk about in the next slides. So you can see here on the left our base model output. It has a 30-meter resolution, which means it's showing us in a 30-meter by 30-meter plot of ground anywhere in the state of California what the priority value for that piece of ground is. And we take those values and we average them by the watersheds in California. So you see on the right a map of all of the watersheds in California. The dark blue watersheds, the watersheds with a priority value of 5, are the highest priority watersheds. And the light blue with the priority value of 1 are watersheds that have the lowest priority. But this map doesn't yet take into account beaver distribution in California. A lot of the watersheds you see that are dark blue that have the highest priority happen to be watersheds that also have abundant beaver populations. And watersheds that already have abundant beaver populations probably will not be our priority. So the way this map looks will shift as beaver distribution is incorporated. And like I said before, we can adjust weighting so that the model is suitable for different objectives. You can see on the left that the weighting has been adjusted to favor anadromous salmonid habitat. And you see that the highest priority watersheds shift toward the coast and toward watersheds that anadromous salmonids often use. And you see the same thing on the right when we adjust the weighting for wildfire probability and severity. The watersheds that are higher priority are those that might benefit from the wildfire resilience that beavers can create. Now we've selected our projects. It's time for us to move some beavers. Before we can do that, we have to execute a translocation agreement. And that agreement grants us access, our program staff, to the property post-translocation for monitoring, which Kyle is going to talk about here in a bit. And it also acknowledges the fact that we selected the beavers that we're bringing to this property because they were at risk of lethal depredation. And it's important to our program that we avoid any chance of lethal depredation on the release site properties. So our beavers are loaded up in their nice dog crates, and we put them in our climate-controlled custom beaver translocation wagons, and we haul them to their release sites. If the trip is particularly long, we're sure to make frequent stops to get them some water. We'll soak them with water to make sure they keep cool. And if it's particularly hot, we can get them some ice. And once they're released, if we see fit for subsequent releases on the properties, we will be sure to do that so that we can introduce new genetics to the population there so that we can create a healthy, wild, reproducing population.
Thank you, Tanner. Gosh, we've had some good questions come in for you.
Hey, Corky.
Yeah.
I think we should probably take like one question, maybe two, if it's a short one, and then move on and save the rest for the end, just in the
Okay.
interest of time.
Sure. One of them was, how do you prevent the beavers from imprinting on the humans?
You want me to take that one, Tanner, or you got it?
I can do it some justice. Our trapping season is strategically planned out so that we are trapping beavers that are a little past imprinting age. I think we are also careful that we reduce our interactions with the animals while they're being held captive, both to keep them comfortable and to ensure that they're not getting too habituated to humans' presence.
And this one kind of ties with it. Do the beavers generally fare poorly, or are they relatively resilient in temporary captivity?
I think they're quite resilient. They're a pretty hardy animal, and they're generally pretty calm tempered in captivity. I think they owe a lot of their performance in captivity to their temperament. I think, of course, they are stressed and afraid in captivity, but they seem like they're generally pretty calm animals. We also provide them with a sizable lodge box in captivity that we've built for them, and they also have access to I believe it's a 1,500-gallon pool of water that they can hide from us in. So if they're not hiding from us in the lodge box, they're definitely hiding from us in the water. And I think those things in concert with the measures we take to impact them as little as possible helps them fare pretty well.
Super. All right, I'm going to hold these other questions till the end so that we can hear from Kyle and the continuation of the presentation.
All right. Thank you, Corky. On to you, Kyle.
All right. Thank you, everybody. My name is Kyle Pagel. I'm a senior environmental specialist on the program, and my role, along with all the other field work that all of us do, is mainly focused on statewide project coordinating. So working with project proposals that come in, coordinating site surveys, and things of that nature. So I'm going to give you guys an update on all of the projects that we've done and talk about our post-translocation monitoring. So when we translocate beavers to a site, it's important for us to follow up on things and know what's happening after the fact. So there's generally two facets to our monitoring framework. We have the monitoring the beavers themselves. And then we have the resulting ecosystem responses to the beavers and any engineering that they do. So when we're looking at beavers, we are tracking beaver movement because we want to know if beavers are staying at the sites that we release them at, because we are a restoration program, and if beavers are not present on the site, restoration won't be happening. And so we want to see what parts of the habitat that they're using and how they're moving about. So we monitor that with the various tags that Tanner touched upon. So we deploy game cameras across our sites, and those allow us to pick up images like this of nighttime images where we can see where beavers are at, how they're interacting with each other, see if certain tagged beavers are on camera, see based off of ear tags. If we get daytime photos, we can tell individual beavers apart. And then we also monitor that with the VHF, the radio tags, or the GPS tags, and actually pick up precise locations of where beavers are on the landscape. We also can monitor that using those pit tags, the microchips that are in them, kind of like what your cat or dog has. And we deploy these pit antennas in stream. And if a beaver swims over the top of that antenna, it'll record and log the date and time and that unique ID for that beaver. So that's how we can see how they're moving about the landscape. And then we also look at, obviously, their survival. Survival is an easy way for us to quantify whether the release has been successful and if beavers are going to make the impact that we want them to, restoring ecosystem function. We need to know that they're still there. And so checking on survival uses the same type of things I just touched upon: game cameras, VHF, and GPS tags, and then those pit tags. And then we also want to look at the different engineering activities that they do across the landscape. So we usually monitor that by walking the site, surveying for new dams, new burrows, things of that nature. And we also employ some drones for that. And then the last thing we look at for beavers is, of course, reproduction. We want to see that the beavers that we've put on a site hopefully reproduce in the future and create more offspring, and then those offspring can disperse on the landscape and spread the restoration benefits across the landscape. So then the other asset or part of that we look at is the ecosystem response component. So when we're looking at the ecosystem, we're trying to find ways to measure the impact that these beavers have had on the landscape at the site that we translocated them to. So we're looking at different things. Beavers can create really complex habitats, and these can benefit fish. So we want to make sure that we are capturing the effects that this has on the fish population at a site. So some of these habitat changes can change the fish assemblages or even the fish abundance. So we will, at certain sites, do some electrofishing where we actually shock fish temporarily, and then you can mildly sedate them and put pit tags in them, the same pit tags that we put in the beavers, and then release the fish. And then using those same pit antennas that will pick up beavers, you can place them strategically across the stream complex and pick up, if you put a pin antenna on the downstream side and the upstream side of a beaver dam, you can actually pick up which fish are passing through the dam or getting over them. And so that touches upon fish passage, which we look at. It's really an important thing to monitor when talking about beaver translocation, because especially in anadromous waters, it's kind of a hot topic because there's a threat of cutting off upstream reaches from migration, which, generally fish can move over, through, or around these beaver dams because while they do back up water, they are somewhat porous. And so, especially during high flow events, they can move through there. But it's easier to prove that with pit tags and actually be able to quantify how fish passage is occurring. So the other thing we look at, of course, in a dry state like California, We want to know whether beavers are affecting surface water volume. We want to see whether they're affecting the groundwater volume and the groundwater recharge. So we monitor that in a few ways. For surface water, we will use drones, seen here on the right, and get these nice aerial images like you're seeing in the top left. And we can monitor the surface water increase from year to year as long as we continue to do drone flights. And then we also monitor the different hydrological metrics by using water loggers, which are simply these small little data loggers that we put in stream and then in other places located around the wetland. And those will actually record data continuously for quite a long time. So we pick up changes in seasonal flow, and we can pick up other hydrological measurements like water temperature or chemistry. And those are important because these beaver complexes, turn into a rather complex system that has the potential to create water chemistry conditions that are beneficial to fish and are beneficial to amphibians. And so we want to record all that. So then looking at our project overview. So to date, we have 5 projects that we've conducted across 8 unique sites. We have tribal sites, federal, municipal, and private. We've translocated 42 beavers, and that is made up of 10 distinct family groups. So you can see there's a wide range there. And we have trapped beavers from 7 different conflict sources, 1 NGO or conservancy land, 3 state wildlife areas, and 3 municipalities. So diving into this project by project, start with our first project that we did. We started out with 2 pilot projects. One was at Tasman-Coyam, which is in Plumas County on Maidu Summit Consortium land. And the other pilot project we did was at the Tule River Reservation down in Tulare County. So starting with the first one, our first release was conducted in October of 2023. We moved a family group of 7 beavers up to Plumas County. And I'll just go through and highlight some interesting things. First off, one of the most interesting things we saw was that the adult female of the group, who we had tagged with a GPS tag, the GPS tag picked up that she traveled downstream 5 miles, almost within the first day following being translocated. And then she returned within a day or two, all the way back upstream to join back up with the family group. And that's kind of a common theme that you'll see in the following slides. But that was really interesting. And one of the cool things that a GPS tag can pick up that otherwise we would not, even if we just had game cameras, we would have just seen that she wasn't on photo and then she was on camera a couple days later and not known that she traveled that far. Another really, really cool thing, like I talked about, natural reproduction is important. And we observed natural reproduction over that winter and the following spring, with wild-born kits showing up on camera in spring of 2024. This family group has been particularly busy engineering all sorts of stuff. They initially started out with a burrow that they made a bank burrow within a few days following translocation, and then following some late fall high flows after some rain events. They abandoned their burrow and started building a lodge, which you can see in the top middle photo. And then they have built several dams along the system, which have been really cool to see. And I'll show a slide next that shows that. But they've been very, very busy doing what beavers do and what we hope beavers do. So then we followed that release up with another release the following year in July of 2024. We released a family group on a side tributary that leads into this valley. And that family group had a few mortalities occur in it following release about a month after of predation and some illnesses. But several of the beavers from that family group persisted and they survived, and they have built quite the dam complex on this side tributary, which has been really exciting. And then that particular group also has had natural reproduction observed with smaller kits popping up this past spring in 2025. And then we did a supplemental release for some genetic diversity into that group in July of 2025 this year. And the other cool thing is we've seen genetic mixing across the valley between all of these groups. So we have animals that have been released in the October 2023 group move all the way to the south part of the valley. We've had animals from the July 2024 release group move all the way to the south part of the valley, and they have all joined up with another wild beaver that was present there. So nice to see that all occurring. And then showing the wetland complex that has been created by the first family that was released. On the left, you'll see aerial photography that is of this pond complex. And this aerial imagery was taken a month and a half following release. But the beavers had not moved down into this area just yet. So this is kind of you can take this as a pre-beaver translocation image. And then on the right, you'll see the imagery from this past fall. So 2 years post-release, and you'll see kind of highlighted there, might be hard for some people to see, but there is a dam that the beavers put in the top right on the main stem of the creek there, and effectively diverted a decent amount of water into this whole pond complex. And they built a sizable dam on their pond in the middle where their lodge is. Their lodge is located on the left side there. And they built a huge dam that runs the whole extent of that over 100 meters long, 150 meters long. And they've proceeded to dam several areas in there. And so you can just see, if you kind of quickly go back and forth between the two, you can see there's quite a more water flowing through all of this wetland complex. And the beavers have connected several of these ponds that used to be relatively disconnected, and now they're all effectively turning into one giant complex. So moving on to our second pilot program, the Tule River Reservation. This is down in Tulare County. We conducted several releases here. The first release was in June of 2024. The Tule River tribe did a sizable amount of work putting BDAs in at all these sites, which effectively helped raise the water level and kind of prime the site for beavers to be translocated to them. We released a family group in June of 2024 at the first site, Eagle Creek. They survived there for about a month and a half, and then unfortunately water levels began to drop severely, and they stayed put and ended up being predated by mostly bears, and actually had one wolf predation seen there. And then we had another group, a breeding pair, you can see in the bottom left here, that we moved to another site on the other side of the reservation. This group, they almost immediately burrowed. That bottom left photo, they're essentially sitting on top of their burrow entrance. And they began damming. They took over some of these beaver dam analogs that the tribe had created. And they were active in foraging and tree felling. As you can see in the bottom right, they were knocking trees down, and they were actually adding on to these BDAs that had been brought in place and raising the water levels. And then moving on, we did another release that September of 2024 at yet another creek system on the reservation. We released a family group here. We observed active foraging, and they began moving upstream onto Sequoia National Forest. And the really interesting part was they moved upstream up some extremely steep drainages, and we actually saw some foraging sign observed in spring of 2025, which is obviously promising. And then we did a supplemental release in August of 2025 back at the original release site. We released a pair of beavers to supplement some genetic diversity into the system. So moving on, off of the pilot programs that we have done, this year was our first year where we started actually working towards doing translocations to these project proposals that have come in. So our first release we did was on private lands in Siskiyou County. This was in October of 2025. We released a breeding pair on the site. And as I kind of talked about earlier, with the one group, the first group we did were the female dispersed offsite quite a ways. These beavers followed that trend. They dispersed offsite within about the first day following translocation. And they actually remained offsite for about 6 weeks. So we had them on our pit antennas, those in-stream antennas that record when they pass over them. We had them on there within the first day, leaving the site. And then using the VHF tags, we actually detected them way off site. And they didn't return to the site until about 6 weeks later. And then they stayed put on the site. So whatever they were doing off site, they decided to come back. And then we have them on camera and on pit antenna being pretty active in damming and tree felling, as you can see. And they actually built a bank burrow. Then they followed a similar trend of that first group where once some high flows happened, they abandoned their bank burrow and started building a lodge. Okay, and then we did another release in October onto some municipal lands in Sierra County. This was a family group that was translocated, and we've seen them damming, doing some bank burrowing, and also foraging. And once again, we had one individual from this group that dispersed off the site and left the rest of the family group. The rest of the family group stayed on site, and the one that dispersed off site actually went down an extremely steep river canyon, down a waterfall, and there's plenty of foraging sign and this burrow down here showing that that single individual that dispersed is still on the landscape and still doing well. So interesting to see the trends of dispersal happening. And then the last site we did was in November of 2025 on some federal lands in Sierra County. We translocated a family group to this particular site, and we also observed some dispersal offsite by at least one individual. And unfortunately, with this group, got them in, and then because of some of those earlier storms, we kind of missed our weather window and did not have too much monitoring occur the rest of the season. So that'll be one that obviously we'll swing back to and hope to pick up and see what beavers have done in the off season for us. And then following all those activities from the past 3 years, of course, we'll pick it right back up in the spring here and do some surveys, and all these previous sites that I listed will be surveyed for beaver presence, make sure we know whether beavers are still on site or off site, and then we'll monitor them for overwinter reproduction with all of our game cameras. And then if needed, we will do supplemental translocations to either increase genetic diversity or just put beavers back on sites where they may have either dispersed off of or not survived. So.
All right. Thank you, Kyle. Let's see. Now I got to figure out which was. All right. Looks like I don't see questions yet for you. So let's go back to a couple others that were from before. One was, what percentage of translocated beavers get tail-mounted transmitters?
I can take that. Typically, if we have a family group, we will typically tail tag only the adults. Or in some cases, if we have a really large family group, we will tail tag some of the subadults because with the kind of family makeup, usually subadults are the ones that are gonna disperse off from the family group. So for us, it's kind of that twofold. It's nice to know where the adults are going and whether they're surviving and get that movement data, but it's also really interesting for us to get that subadult dispersal data and see where they head off to.
Can people volunteer with y'all?
Ollie?
Not yet. I will touch on how to get involved in my final slides. So stay tuned.
Excellent. What is the life expectancy of the tail tags, and what is the durability experience of the tail tags?
Yeah, we've seen tail tags, the units themselves, the VHF, the radio tag is a lot more simple. All it does is beep and we have to like hone in on it. But that one, those tags themselves will last several years. The GPS tags that we have, depending on how we program them, they will last anywhere from a couple months to 6 to 8 months with battery life. Those ones are taking points all the time and actually storing them and on board, and then we have to go download them. As far as the tags staying on the Beavers, that is a little more hard to pin down. It is not an exact science, and unfortunately, Beavers are not shaped in a way that allows for them to wear a collar that a deer might wear or anything like that. So these tags tend to fall out. We've had some tags last, I believe we've had some last almost a year staying on, and we've had some fall out within a couple months. So it just depends. But yeah, right now it's kind of the best method, but we're looking into other ways to tag these animals.
Right. In your prioritization model, is the red the highest benefit? That was, I think it was
Yeah, that would be for Tanner.
Tanner.
I don't know if we want to swap back there or not, but the red is actually the lowest areas of prioritization for our model.
I will plan to go back at the end. I just don't want to lose my place in the screen sharing.
Sure.
Yeah,
That
and
was
really
the
what
last question in our list here. So, Molly, if you want to take it back over.
All right. Hi again, everyone. All right, so I'm going to wrap it up and then we can open it up for more questions if there's time. So just what's next with the program? I included this fun image here to show that the Department of Fish and Wildlife has done a lot of things with beavers in the past. We are fortunately no longer dropping beavers out of planes using parachutes. We have learned a lot with recent research on the best methods to use for translocating beavers, both humanely and in a way that will better help us achieve our definition of success. And so in our initial efforts, we have learned quite a bit. The aquatic habitat in California, there is a high geographic variability to the status of our aquatic habitat that supports beavers. We've altered a lot of habitat in the state and removed beavers for such a long time that there are places where, our streams need help to get them to a place where beaver translocation is reasonable. We have a lot of seasonality in our flows. There are areas of the state, primarily along the coast, with extreme velocity in winter flows that don't support permanent dam structures remaining on the landscape for very long. A lot of the areas of the Sierras that we've seen have ephemeral flows that don't support that stable aquatic escape cover for beavers to protect themselves from predators. The biggest thing that we've found is not only water depth, but the connectivity of suitable water depth habitat for beavers to move within the landscape in an effort to protect themselves from predators. And so when we're assessing these sites that folks submit proposals for, what we're really looking for, even if they have perennial flow on site, is really substantial water depth and the connectivity of deep water so that beavers can function as we hope they do in these new areas. Forage is another large limiting factor, not just the abundance of their preferred food species like willow, alder, cottonwood, and aspen, but the proximity to that, again, aquatic escape cover. There are many areas where our land use conflicts with beavers' access to forage. Beavers really want easily accessible food. That's why they dig these canals to access areas that are further afield to get their food in areas where they're protected from predation. And as Kyle alluded to, in many instances, we're learning a lot about either initial and permanent or temporary dispersal from our sites. Just because beavers may move within the first day or weeks of translocation doesn't mean that they're not going to come back. And so the tracking work that we're doing is really important and opening our eyes to basically that sometimes beavers leave, never to be seen again, or sometimes they come back and do exactly what we're hoping to see them do in the areas that we're wanting them to do them. A note on the tracking, the best information that we have right now based on the science is tail tagging beavers, but we are actively working with a number of different companies to try and work with them to develop some kind of tracking technology that is a little bit less invasive than tail tagging beavers. And so hopefully we'll be able to work with those companies to develop something that is longer lasting, more effective, and we can all feel better about. And so looking forward to this field season this year, hold on just a sec, I've got all kinds of Zoom things in front of my slides. There we go. So this year, again, we've gotten 22 project applications. So far, we've assessed 14 of those applications. We will be placing beavers, supplemental beavers at 3 of our translocation sites in efforts to establish self-sustaining populations. And so in areas where beavers were historically native and are absent, we really want to do these supplemental translocations to establish these self-sustaining genetically viable populations, or in areas where there are existing beavers that may be isolated from other nearby beavers. We want to put more there to create these self-sustaining populations. As of now, in addition to those supplemental translocations, we have 2 shovel-ready sites, so sites that are ready to go and will be receiving beavers in 2026. We've determined that there are 3 sites that are unsuitable, and that's primarily due to high flows in flashy systems where they need substantial work to get them to a place where we feel comfortable that beavers will stay put and have the ability to actually impact the habitat with dam building. And then again, ephemeral flows are an issue. There are sites that we've assessed that just don't have substantial enough flow to protect beavers from predation. We have 6 sites that we have kind of flagged for the future. Those are sites where we have recommended some habitat enhancements to get them to a better place for beaver translocation, or there are considerations for the seasonal timing of releases. Some of our high elevation Sierra sites, they get snow earlier in the year. And so we have to be cognizant that we're putting beavers in these areas with enough time to establish prior to winter snow and lack of access for our monitoring efforts. And then again, there are sites where we have encouraged folks to reach out to neighboring landowners just to ensure that there aren't any concerns with beaver activity in that area, so we can avoid any perceived conflict from beavers that we translocate. Moving forward, we've got quite a lot of work to do. We are working with a number of facilities statewide to identify new holding facilities, which will dramatically increase the geographic area that our staff can cover. We're working to expand statewide partnerships with landowners who hope to receive beavers. And as Tanner alluded to, we are identifying these priority watersheds so that we can in addition to still accepting proposals from private landowners, we can now do outreach to landowners within these priority watersheds in an effort to kind of do landscape scale management using beavers rather than just piecemeal where we get proposals from. We're also launching a salmon impacts and rangeland impact study. We're going to be doing some new pilot translocations with some landowners to really look at the impacts on rangeland as well as salmon anadromous habitat, just to ensure and kind of prove that beavers can impact these lands in a meaningful way. And then, of course, we're working on the beaver management and restoration plan. We have done a number of scoping, and we are still going through our tribal scoping process. We're working with a technical advisory group of some of the best and brightest scientists across the country to incorporate the best available science, identify any gaps and research needs so that we can initiate and contribute to studies to advance the science around beaver translocation and management. That's kind of where our salmon and rangeland studies have spurred from. And looking at the relationship between beavers and our listed species or special interest species in the state. Through our modeling efforts headed by Tanner, we're looking at the project prioritization, which we're also incorporating regional restoration objectives, as well as biodiversity indices and our state recovery plans for listed species. Within that plan, we'll be defining, as Tanner again alluded to, the historic native range of Castor canadensis in California. And we've been doing a lot of work, looking at historical trapping records of beavers, museum specimens, and university specimens and their sources, as well as talking to tribal organizations and trying to figure out the most accurate information of where beaver historically existed in the state. And then identifying the greatest beaver restoration opportunities, looking at these internal projects on CDFW lands and combining those with these external projects. So the proposals that we're receiving in an effort to kind of look at large scale, landscape scale, and watershed scale restoration using beavers. And then I just want to end by providing the resources that are available to folks. We have a beaver page on our wildlife website. There you can find our translocation project proposal form, as well as a recorded webinar that we did last fall that tells you a little bit more about what we're looking for in terms of translocation sites and how you can get involved in identifying beaver translocation places that we might be interested in. We have Living with Beaver guidance, and that will link you to all kinds of coexistence resources, including the Beaver Help Desk. We have our Beaver Observation Survey tool that I mentioned earlier. That's where if you have a beaver sighting, you can report that right there, and it'll get incorporated into our map that helps us determine what the distribution of beavers is in the state of California. And that's always helpful information. We have our 2024 status report on beaver restoration projects that you can look at on our website. And we are getting ready to publish our 2025 status report, so stay tuned for that. And then coming soon, we will have our coexistence resources available online, our beaver management and restoration plan, which again is still going through scoping, and we will hopefully have a draft pretty soon. And then we have been working with the University of Minnesota to update the California Beaver Restoration Assessment Tool, which is fondly referred to as the BRAT, to make that a more effective tool in identifying the damming capacity of our waterways in California and essentially incorporating that into our beaver prioritization model to see where beavers could build the most dams to contribute the most to our climate ailments in California. And with that, we want to leave you with our contact information. We have a Beaver Restoration Program email. And so I don't know what time it is. We're getting pretty close. So if there's any questions that we're not able to get to tonight, please feel free to reach out to us and we will respond to your emails. And thank you so much. We really appreciate everyone taking the time tonight and coming to listen to us, and hope you learned a lot, and let us know if you have any lingering questions.
I learned a lot. I'm guessing a lot of people learned a lot, right?
I like to hear that.
There's a kind of a fun one here. What is the heaviest beaver you have trapped?
Oh, I wanna hear what the guys have to say. Anyone want to pitch in?
I think the largest we've trapped was 55 or 56 pounds, somewhere around there. There's certainly larger ones out there.
No,
Yeah, that's about the max for me as well. Around 55.
that's a child.
Yeah. Yeah, they're a lot bigger than we think. My favorite thing is when folks have had the opportunity to see a beaver out of water, because typically you just see, their nose, their eyes, their ears, and they look tiny, and then they come out and you're like, it's the size of my dog.
Super. Do beavers get along? No. Do beavers and otters get along? Or do they compete with each other?
Yeah, we've seen some instances of otters and beavers cohabitating at some of these translocation sites. Actually, it's kind of a good indicator of ecosystem health when otters show up, because it means that beavers are enhancing the habitat for fish that otters are coming to feed on. And so, yeah, we have some really fun game camera images of beavers swimming by a whole mob of otters, and yeah, they coexist very well. I mean, with any species, you can probably guess that they will occasionally feed on beaver young or sick and injured beavers. But in most cases where you have a healthy population, they coexist just fine.
We have a guest that is recommending the California Beaver Help Desk.
Yes, yeah, definitely. If you have beaver issues, please reach out to them. They're an amazing resource. They now have, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I know several of you were on the call, 25 folks that are permitted or are certified in the state to install these devices. And they're just a great resource for coexistence, technical, and financial assistance.
Super. Well, we're going to wrap up this evening. Hopefully, we'll have people join us next month to learn more about salmon, and particularly salmon in Pewter Creek from the Streamkeeper, the Pewter Creek Streamkeeper Max. And hopefully, you've marked your calendar for California Duck Days, because we hope to see you there. So, thank you so much to Molly and Tanner and Lee and Kyle for sharing all of your information about beavers tonight.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Corky, for inviting us. This was fun.
You bet. All right. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Good night.
you.
Bye.
Bye.